Paradise Lost is undoubtedly the greatest work of John Milton. This great poem deals with the fall of man from the Garden of Eden, his coming to earth and his ultimate salvation by Christ. The poet begins with an invocation. The poet asks the muse, that is, the goddess of poetry and art, to inspire him. He says that he is going to write a great poem and seeks the help of the muse in this grand endeavor. This invocation is in tradition with the writing of epic poems like Homer's Iliad. The purpose of the invocation was to state the theme of the poem at the beginning. Milton states the subject of his epic poem, that is, man's first disobedience. The poet asks the muse to sing about man's first disobedience, the forbidden fruit, his exile from Eden, and his eventual redemption through Jesus Christ. The prologue clearly shows that the subject matter will be taken from the first chapter of Genesis, the disobedience of man in eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and his fall. The consequence of the fall was that it brought death into the world and all the woes from which man has continued to suffer. But we should notice that although the story begins with the man who fell, it also mentions the greater man, Jesus, who will redeem us. Now the action of the poem begins. The scene shifts to a burning lake. Satan, the commander of the fallen angels, is lying on the burning lake. Around him there are other fallen angels, all of whom were thrown out of heaven when they revolted against God and were defeated and thrown into hell. Satan is in a state of shock. After the brightness and splendor of heaven, he has not quite adjusted himself to this dark place. Milton describes the burning lake in these words: "A dungeon horrible on all sides round as one great furnace flamed, yet from those flames no light but rather darkness visible, served only to discover sights of woe. Region of sorrow, doleful shades where peace and rest can never dwell, hope never comes." Satan is the first to rouse himself from his stupor and the burning lake. He thinks of the pleasures of heaven and feels, well, sad. Then, he looks around himself at his mates. His eyes first fall on his associate, Beelzebub. He talks to Beelzebub. Satan is not repentant. He is full of high disdain for God. Satan is surprised to find a change in Beelzebub. Satan addresses Beelzebub, saying he doesn't look like the friend he knew in heaven. Satan expresses his grievance against God, who defeated him and threw him out of heaven along with his mates. Satan describes how he and his associate angels fought with God and lost. Although they've been beaten, all is not lost. Satan does not consider it his defeat. He says that they have lost only a battle, not the whole war. He expresses his determination to carry on his war against God. What if the field be lost? All is not lost. The unconquerable will and study of revenge, immortal hate and courage never to yield. And what is else not to be overcome? Beelzebub replies that he is upset and worried about the current state of affairs. But Satan consoles him. Satan tells him that to be weak is to be miserable. He says that their goal from now on is to be evil. To do aught good never will be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight. He suggests the pursuit of evil to thwart the plans of God, out of good still to find ways of evil. The angels assemble in squadrons, just like an organized army. The poet gives a description of these fallen angels. The first to come is Moloch, who is covered in blood. He somehow deceived Solomon, an Old Testament king, to build a temple for him. Next comes Chemos. After the Israelites made it out of Egypt, they started worshipping this angel. His followers indulged in obscene and vulgar rites. He had his followers over a vast area of land. Then Baalim and Ashtaroth came together. Baalim was the sun god and Ashtaroth was the moon goddess. She was worshipped by unmarried girls. They were male and female pagan deities. Then came Astarte. This goddess was worshipped by Phoenician virgins and also by the Israelites in their promised land. Tammuz comes next. He was supposedly wounded every year, which caused the river Adonis to become a purplish color because of his blood. Syrian girls mourned his death by singing love songs. After him came Dagon, a Philistine sea god whose upper half is man, the lower fish. Then came Rimnon. He had the insolence to defy the authority of God. He was worshipped in what is now modern-day Syria. After him came Isis, Osiris, and Horus. They were bestial and beastly Egyptian gods with animal heads. The last to arrive was Belial. Nobody ever built a temple for him, but he can be found everywhere. The poet says that there were other fallen angels also, but it would take forever to name them all. The fallen angels were in a dejected state. Satan rekindles their hope with his speech. He orders that his flag be raised. Then a trumpet is blown. When the fallen angels see the flag and hear the trumpet, they raise their flags, spears, and shields and roar with one loud voice. They start marching and assemble in front of Satan, waiting for his command. Satan stands like a tower over his army. His mind is full of mixed feelings of pride, grief, and more. He is overwhelmed by emotions. Thrice he tries to speak but could not. At last he speaks. He says that they are brave soldiers. He asks them not to feel dejected. They will rise again, but they can't fight God directly. They have to use fraud or guile this time. After Satan has given his speech, a group of fallen angels led by Mammon start digging the ground for taking out gold. Mammon is a greedy, money-loving devil. In heaven, his head was always bent as he looked at the ground, as the pavements of heaven were made of gold. Then the fallen angels build with gold a huge hall named Pandemonium for holding a conference. It has huge pillars and even a golden roof. It is more magnificent than anything ever seen on earth. Preparations for the conference begin. The Pandemonium is a vast building. Even then, all the fallen angels cannot be accommodated as they are big in numbers. So the angels reduce themselves in size. Even then, there is overcrowding in the hall. Then Satan rises and the great consultations begin. With this, Book I ends.